Hello, and welcome to part 1 of Completionist Terraria. In this part, I will be touring the main castle, which is effectively the central hub of this world that we're going to be touring within the series. Now, before I get into it, I just want to say that there's a bunch of people I actually have to thank with regards to helping me build the world. About 99% of this was basically something I did on my own over the course of like the last year, but some things, this first part in particular, were actually things that my friend Mike helped me with, so a big thank you to him, and I'm going to mention those people in the description. So what's going to be happening here is we're going to be going through the area, and I'm just going to explain bit by bit what all the decorations are and why they're there. So this would be the moat of the bridge. This is the tower. There's some water down below. It's pretty self-explanatory. That right there is tin plating block, which is actuated so that it's pressed in, which is supposed to be like a portcullis. There's a few things that I'm going to complain about with regards to Terraria, is that there's an issue of forced perspective here. The portcullis, the actual gate, is like, the idea when I'm walking across this platform is I'm going through the gate. So it's like the gate is facing the screen, but it's actually supposed to be going from left to right, as if I'm passing through the gate. Yeah, so that's that. Here we have this bridge, self-explanatory. You have banners, you have statues. It's supposed to be sort of a royal entrance to the main castle. And in terms of size, if you want to imagine this thing in 3D, this whole place is supposed to be like large enough that you could imagine various, you know, rows and rows of horses would be, it would be big enough for horses to walk through. So before we go on, what we have here is we have these two rings of tin brick with stained glass symbol that's being suspended through chains, by chains from the bridge above. And the only thing to say about this is obviously just something that was set up for decoration, but the actual symbol in stained glass is actually done like that on purpose. It's a cross with little things jutting out on the sides. That is actually the symbol of the precursors, which is effectively the civilization upon which the current civilization, which is part of this castle, was built upon. So they found the symbol and they borrowed it, and that's what that is. Now, before we get into any of the stuff on the right, I'm just going to go down here and explain a little bit about what we're dealing with here. So, what we have here is this giant castle, okay? Now, basically, the idea with this whole castle is this castle is built into a hill, which is resting on top of a plateau, which is surrounded by gorges and rivers on all sides. So you have a river, you have a gorge on this side. And on the eastern side, the northern and southern side is just gorges. On the western side, it's gorges that are more shallow and a river. And on top of this plateau, there's a hill, and the castle that we're in right now is basically built into this hill, and that's exactly what you're seeing. You know, what you're seeing to the right of me are rooms that are effectively just full of banners. Now, the idea is these aren't actually decorative. The idea that I had is that further to the right, the banners are actually sewn, and these are sort of like storage rooms that are used to actually keep the banners. It was also a nice little trick that I had for organizing all the banners before I figured out where I would start setting them up, so I had them all in front of me. This isn't all the banners, but it's, you know, it's most of the ones that don't fit into any obvious category, like corruption or hallow banner or, you know, slime banners over here. The rooms on my right, this room and the one below it, these are pretty stupid rooms. They're just rooms for two of my friends that use the world. That's all they are. I mean, you just see some rich mahogany wood and furniture and stuff like that. It's pretty boring, but that's effectively what it is. This main hall that we're in right here, again, it's used for banner storage and there's decorative statues, but it's effectively just a decorative hallway, and that's about it. Now, before we go down, I just want to cross over here into this section. So, when I talked about the gorge, this is what I meant. This is the western end of this plateau, and the river that you're seeing below me down there is... this is the shallowest sort of side of the plateau. You know, this is the trench on the western side of the plateau is the most shallow. You know, you'd fall into water. On the other sides, you'd fall very far down into the ground. I figured that the whole of the Terraria world has a very shallow crust, so it's easy to imagine, you know, big trenches and stuff going into the ground. And you see the dirt on the jutting out from the side of the castle here. This is part of the hill further into the background that you could see in further parts of the plateau. That there is a tower in the background that's further to the north, because what you're seeing when you're looking into the screen is you know, the background is north of where we're standing. Now, these few chambers below the tower are, or at least they should be, pretty self-explanatory. This is a jailhouse, or rather what used to be a jailhouse. You know, there's chains and stuff and bars on the windows. This is what used to be the jailhouse before other jailhouses were constructed elsewhere in the main compound. I'll get to touring the rest of the main compound later, but this is sort of a primitive jailhouse. If visitors ever entered the castle from the main gate, you could always apprehend them here and arrest them if anything were necessary. Now, this used to be the jailhouse, so it's not really used that way anymore. And the area down here, which used to be a jail cell, has now been converted into what's effectively a workshop. And I've actually had people try and guess what this chamber here was for. And if you can't tell via the decorations, this is supposed to be a sculpting area. That's where you have blocks of stone over here, misshapen stone that have yet to be turned into anything. I know you can't actually sculpt these kinds of statues in the game, but the sort of the role-playing idea here is that you can. And this chamber here is just a random chamber I built a very long time ago. This is actually where the painter lived before the rest of the place was really built. And in lore, what this effectively is just another dungeon cell that was reconverted when this place turned into a sculpting area. Now let's go back over here. So, right below me, and I'm gonna go down here first. This room here is mostly built for practical purposes. You have chests for preparing for boss fights and stuff, and things that give you buffs and potions, etc. This is actually the main spawn room. When this is the default spawn of the game, you would spawn right here, and you have a bunch of what are they? You'd have a bunch of signposts telling you what to do, and there's one of these boxes over here to announce what happens in the world. It's just there's a whole bunch of very neat accessibles here, and that's pretty much what this is. It's the kind of room that you'd imagine in a game like Morrowind. This is like where you spawn. It's a boring room of wood. The room right below is more or less a miscellaneous storage room. You see various crates, boxes, kegs, etc., barrels. This here is sort of a mini bar. This is where they'd store beer and various alcoholic drinks. That is a toilet where you can shit down into the river if you want. Probably not a good idea. Pollute, but whatever. Miscellaneous storage. I just have miscellaneous storage chests. This whole section of the castle is mostly used for storage, hence it's pretty boring. The smoke blocks here are supposed to be coming up from the fire, but that's effectively the effect there. So now we're going to go over here. Now, this section and the section below, as you could probably read, is storage cells. This whole area is effectively built for storage. And I want to point out how I used weapon racks and item frames to indicate a little bit about what the area was for. The pickaxe and hammer indicate that this is where we store blocks and things that we mine. So mostly blocks and themed blocks, etc. These, like, 7 chests right here are, like, the most used chests that I've used. And this isn't all items world, but this is effectively where I deposit all the items. And it goes all the way down. I mean, this storage cell area doesn't store everything, but it stores everything that it would make sense to store here. You know, most usables, most pieces of furniture, most pieces of decoration, etc. And yes, that is effectively it. There's various weapon racks used as decoration, etc. Now, this area, and by this area I mean basically these 3 parallelogram-shaped rooms, as well as these 2 rooms, this room, this whole part of the world. We're right under the main castle right now, and this is sort of the factory wing. This is the industrial part. Well, it's not to say that it's industrial, because it's not really a super intense factory. There's not, if you notice, there's not a lot of crafting stations here. What you basically have are various nice-to-use crafting stations. This section up here is dedicated for using with slimes. You see pipes jutting out of the walls. Those are deactuated dynasty wood blocks that are painted various colors. This room is for extract innatables. This room is actually full of just teleporters, and they teleport to the Nexus, which is sort of the main transportation hub of the world, which we'll get to later. Down here, this is actually supposed to be a break room. I have a bunch of banquet tables with jars and bowls and stuff, and food, and a cooking pot, and some tables, and this glass kiln doesn't serve a functional purpose, but somehow I put it there and it added to the ambiance, so it just stayed there. And that's effectively what this section is. So this would be like the break room that the employees and the factory workers and then the people who operate this part of the world take. Yeah, and that's effectively it. The area below, we're going to come down to this tin brick hall below, so I'll just leave that there for now, but it's effectively just used for storage. And ignore that stuff that's even further down, because that's going to be part of another video. Now, this section is basically entirely built out of meteorite brick, and this room in particular is just used for storage of all equipable weapons and armor. Weapons and armor. So, and where a weapon is anything that can be used as a weapon, which includes pickaxes, drills, saws, axes, hammers, etc. And swords, everything. Magic stuff, equipable stuff, wings, hooks, mounts. This is basically my own personal armory, and I have my own personal deposit box right there, and I have my own personal way of, you know, figuring out how much damage my weapons do. Old personal training post. This is not supposed to be an official armory. It's sort of the armory that I use, me being, well, not the lord of the palace, but the caretaker, so to speak. This hall is just my own personal hall. You see various sofas and stuff and break rooms and a nice, you know, nice blue bathroom. And this bed is actually sort of the main bed that I'd use. This is the only room in the whole place that I really sort of consider my room, and I know it's pretty empty, that said, but that's just because of how it's used. This is a teleporter to the Nexus. We'll get to the Nexus and what the Nexus is about later. But you get the sense. What I've been doing here is that the idea was to try and use every kind of material. Now this room, which is made out of ebenstone brick, is for things that go into the Tinker's Workshop. So it's about, you know, things that are equipable, that can be turned into greater equipables and stored. And not every item is here currently, but that's effectively what it is. And we came around. And this room down here, it's the same thing as the other room with the furnaces that I showed you earlier, only it's got adamantite and titanium furnaces, and it's supposed to be used for the hard mode weapons and the hard mode armors, crafting those. And that's why you see weapon racks that are painted different colors. The teal and the green's supposed to be chlorophyte, the orange is supposed to be palladium, teal is supposed to be mithril, I think, pink is adamantite, etc. It actually, I used to think it looked kind of cartoony, but now that I see it, it looks kind of good. White is supposed to be titanium or hallowed, etc. So that's the sense that you have here. So basically all that you have so far is like pure functionality. All of these rooms, you know, they're used for pure functionality. This room is just there to say factory wing, and that's about it. This here is the wood shop. We have the axe weapon racks and wood. We store wood here, woods and goods and things made out of wood, etc. This here is a chimney that's actually broken, so that's why there's this little slit there with smoke coming out of it. The idea is that it's broken and smoke is coming out and spreading into the room, and that's the same thing that's happening up here. And as you have the pipes that are continuing upward. Before we go upstairs, I want to talk about this room. This room is supposed to be a stable. It's supposed to be a stable, and as you could probably see, there's hay wall and hay blocks that are deactuated, and mounts. You store the mounts here. Chains. This is basically where people would bring in the horses. This is sort of supposed to be the service entrance to the palace. You know, people who would visit the palace that would come in on this side will leave their horses here and, you know, go through and walk up the stairs to visit whatever section they wanted to. The entrance I showed you earlier is the front entrance for some sort of royal, you know, entrance, or if an army were to gather before marching to some sort of, on some sort of campaign. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the geography again in a second. Now, we're not gonna go any further west in this case, other than this garden right here. So this garden, as you see, you could have these like garden hedge statues that are made. This one is like some sort of Kirby thing. That's a snake. I actually have to commend Michael because he's the one who made the particular hedge creature things. And I think that one... I think that's supposed to be a duck or something. And this is supposed to be sort of a garden greenhouse type of thing. This isn't where I grow all the herbs, but this is just purely decorative. The way to imagine this place is you see the stone bricks on the other side is it's a garden that's surrounded by a stone walkway on all sides. So that's what this place is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be ornate and pretty looking for, you know, people who visit, you know, the castle. And you might ask yourself, well, hold on, why is the service entrance right next to this garden? Well, that's because where I'm standing right now is actually a road that goes north and south. So you don't actually see the road because this is Terraria and we don't have any depth, but this is actually, I'm standing on that road, and if people were to come in here, they'd actually be walking around the garden. So let's go over here. So this section here is very primitive, and you can tell this. This is one of the most earliest things that was built. Originally, this whole area was built as like a really ghetto, commie housing for NPCs that my friend built because he wanted to get all the NPCs into the world. I eventually made it nicer for them. I made them some unique rooms. I put in some decorations. Sophia here has a fish and a painting and stuff, and Ronald has his paintings, and he's got palm wood, etc., etc. This room here is the metalworking room. Now, as far as practicality goes, this room didn't experience that much usability because I have furnaces and anvils down below, and in terms of just storage, everything's stored down below. This room was built more so as a role-playing device. It makes sense that there'd be a room dedicated towards smithing, and this is where the smiths would gather and store their bars and turn them into weapons and stuff. Is effectively not like a factory, but more of a sophisticated form of swordsmithing and sword crafting would happen in this chamber up here. So yeah, that's that. And that's above the factory floor. Now let's move up to here. And you notice that I used palm wood and normal wood and dynasty and rich mahogany wood. Originally, the idea was to use all the forms of wood here, but eventually I didn't have that much room. The red brick makes sense downstairs because you'd expect a smith to be full of, you know, sort of red bricks. This down here, the room I'm in right now, is supposed to be a textile room for making textiles and storing them. That's why you have that in the item frames, and this is also where the banners would be woven, the banners that are stored over here. The room while we're up right here is a secondary bar. The entire room is a bar. There's a bar stool right there. There's a, you know, beer in the item frame. You have Driskin, the tavern keep. It's not really a tavern, but it's good enough. It's effectively his role now. That's where the merchant lives. And this whole place is sort of a hotel. If you imagine old castles, they'd always have sort of like areas where, you know, not NPCs, but like the butlers and the servants would live. This is effectively that region. Of course, if you enter the castle, you have to go through that region to get to the main hall, which is above us. So this right here, another just room for the nurse. This is another room for a random NPC. And this here is actually the kitchen that's used to prepare meals for all the people that eat the meals upstairs. So this is where the service people would create their food. And this is actually where I store kitchenware, fish, and prepared foods. And it's gray brick that's painted white to give it a more kitchen-y feel. So before we go up, I have to explain a bit about the geography. The area that we're in right now is actually technically underground on one side because it's built on top of a hill. And when I say on top of a hill, it's sort of embedded in the hill. Like, you have these windows here, and these windows down here in this room below, and these windows are jutting out of the hill in the same sense that a window of like a hobbit hole would jut out of a hill. You know, they're jutting out of the hill, and they're square rooms on the inside, but if you were to look at it from the exterior, you'd have this misshapen, you know, rock face that's jutting out of the ground, and, you know, occasionally you have something that looks like, you know, the back wall of these rooms would be sticking out of it, and that's what you see here. Alright, so now we're going to move up here. This is, again, one of the first places I built. This entire room is just gray brick, wooden beams, banners, and paintings. Most of the paintings that are in the world, minus the paintings that are very sort of localized, I did eventually collect all the paintings. I have not all the paintings here, but all the ones that don't fall into any specific category, like the dungeon paintings or the hell paintings, etc. The banners itself are actually organized. There's no banners that repeat. There's no banners, and they're actually set up in a way that's specific, so that the colors actually look nice together. They're not just random colors thrown together for no reason. This room, I imagine, would be the kind of room where armies would gather before a march, and so on and so forth. And this is just like the bottom half of the castle, and this is why I'm saying that it's all built on top of a hill, which I'll talk a bit more about later on. This chamber right here is just storage. Again, it's storage of all the kinds of banners, storage of trophies, wall hangings, statues, etc. That's all that is. And now we're back out here. And while we're out here, I can talk a little bit about the origins of the castle. The idea is that the castle was actually built on top of a hill, but it's not the first thing that was built into this hill. This whole region, this whole plateau, is actually part of an ancient Egyptian deserty civilization, and this civilization eventually collapsed, and what it left behind was some debris and some ruins that were actually refastened and renovated and turned into the castle that you see now. This is the tower that was recently finished with Michael and myself. This here is just a chamber that's supposed to be used to draw in the gate, and you see cog walls over there, which are sort of used to pull it up with chain. This is just a place with cannons in case there's defenses. Now I have to talk about the fact that this tower is actually on the least protected side of the castle. All the other sides of the castle on the north, south, and the west are way more protected, because they're not just separated from the outside world with a tower. There's also a gorge that any enemy army would have to cross. So yeah, what you have here is some marble platforms and some statues. It's all look nice and royally. If emissaries come to the castle and they want to meet the king, they would actually walk up these stairs and go here. And before we get to anything, I just want to mention, this whole section that we're in right here is not sitting on top of the hall down below. I realize that doesn't really, if it were, it wouldn't make much sense structurally how a giant open hall could support a hall like this. So we're not actually directly above it. Remember, everything is built on top of a hill. So it's not built on top, it's built above, but also on top of the hill, right? So it's on top, but behind. And that's why you have the roof down here. This blue tile wall, this is actually supposed to represent the roof of the Great Hall, which is below. We're not sitting on top of that roof. That roof is in front of us. So what you're seeing here, when you're looking at us, is you're seeing the roof of the Great Hall, and you're seeing the, you're seeing this room, the sort of the lesser hall, or the upper hall, which is above but also behind it. It's not resting directly on top of it, is my point. And this entire bridge as well, it's actually supposed to be it's actually within the perspective, it's actually, this whole bridge is supposed to be in front of the bridge that's below. And that's why I used in order to construct this pillar, we used deactuated gray brick rather than gray brick wall. This bridge is supposed to be in front, because remember, when you're looking at this castle, it's like you're seeing through the hill to see the actual interiors of the castle, and the windows are on the other side, jutting out, facing, the other side of the hill is more open, is sort of more flat, and that's where it's on top of that part of the hill that the different buildings are sort of resting upon and looking out over the world. So yeah, this bridge that I'm standing on now is supposed to be behind that, this bridge and walkway down below. And here we go into the upper hall. So any royal person that comes up to the royal hall would come up here, and they could walk through here. And this is supposed to be a purely decorative, but also a decorative room, but also sort of a war meeting room. You have the war table right here. These statues right here, especially these three, the idea is that they're set up in a circle around the war table. So if the war table, there's 6 statues set up at sort of equidistant points around the table if the table is round. You have banners hanging from above. This was all added very recently with the most recent Dungeon Defenders update. Before, this room looked slightly different, but it was effectively the same thing. It's a basic trophy room for the king to impress any person that walks in that we need to impress, who's, gonna get who needs to be sort of impressed by our vanity. And the wall here is actually blue dynasty wall. Anyway, so where I'm in here is one of the main hallways that leads to the upper part of the castle. This whole upper part of the castle is actually built on top of itself, whereas the part of the castle we were in below wasn't built on top of itself. It was built on top of the hill, but each section was more above the other in terms of altitude. This is actually the throne room. You have a throne right here. It's built out of marble. The statues are painted white. This is where the king would meet various guests. They'd walk right through here and say, "Hey, king, what's up?" And the design there is made of every single form of stained glass. And there's actually a pattern here, if you can tell. I used sort of what I did to make the pattern is I made crosses, and then I filled in the squares with more crosses. So it's sort of like a fractal. There's a cross here, and there's a cross there, and in there there's just some sort of... Well, in there there's no cross. In there there's just, you know, 2 squares there and 2 squares there. But I used every single form of stained glass, and I alternated so that you'd get slightly different designs. But that's effectively what you get. Now, I'm going to go up from this point. Now, up here, this is where the painter lives. I used to have him live further down. Oh, he's walked all the way up here. This is where he lives. This is actually supposed to be more of like a common room for various, you know, upper people who live in the upper parts of the castle to gather. But this is effectively the room where he lives and you know, bathes, etc. Because that room right there is the painting room. Yeah, so let's go over here. So this is the painting room. This is the room where I store paints, wallpaper, dye ingredients, dyes, you know, etc. As you can see, I painted it. It was White Dynasty wall and with glass, and I painted the White Dynasty wall with every kind of paint in different places. In the middle, that's rainbow wallpaper, and that's starlight wallpaper for the top. The idea is that this is a room where people actually use to paint, or specifically Enzo, because he's our talent that we've imported. Wait, what? Yeah, okay. And there's 2 paintings standing there, and the idea is that all of these little jars and stuff are different paints and glasses sitting around. So it's you know, it's meant to be very sort of artsy and interesting and colorful. Now we're gonna go up, and this is Rodney. This is effectively where the king and other people, you know, this is a wardrobe, sort of a mini wardrobe. It's not the main wardrobe in the game because I actually have another location which stores the vanity items, but this is where extra vanity items would be stored, is masks, headgear, etc. You have all these chests and mannequins wearing various dresses because this is where you'd set up. This is where the clothier actually lives when he visits the main castle, and this is the teleporter that goes to, well, Costume Palace, which is a different part of the tour, which we'll get to at another time. But yeah, this is just, again, I used boreal wood because I hadn't used boreal wood anywhere else, and this was supposed to be the clothing room. Now up above, I've used all the other kinds of wood at this point. This up here is supposed to be how I use Dynasty wood and White Dynasty wood wall. I used Blue Dynasty wood wall down here, but I used White Dynasty wood wall because the white one makes more sense as part of the set. Unfortunately, there's no Dynasty wood platform, so I'm actually standing on marble platform here. And you can see this whole room has sort of an Asian feel, so I let the hairstylist live here because, for whatever reason, I figured that she's Asian. And she has 3 beds because, well, I guess she's not the only one who lives here. But yeah, that's the idea. And it's just a White Dynasty room wall to hold an NPC. And yes, so this part of the castle now, this is the last part of the castle that is independently resting upon the hill. This is actually the top of the hill in terms of altitude. So I'm just gonna walk out right here. This place right here is actually sitting right on top of this hill, again, which we're not seeing the hill because we're seeing through it, but this is where it would be. And if you walked over to the back, of that wall and looked over the edge, you would see us looking over, all of the rooms and buildings below that are sitting below this hill that you don't see because they're behind the castle. And this is sort of a fire escape that's used to just go up, towards this area. That's, again, this fire escape is supposed to be in front of this bridge in terms of perspective. But that's another thing, because again, remember, we're seeing through the hill. And these various towerlets are more so just for decorative. There's nothing in them. They're just, in lore, they're built this way just to be decorative, just to look sort of imposing. But the idea is that this actual sort of platform is kind of like a courtyard that goes around this tower. And this is Demonite brick painted gray, by the way. It goes around this tower and overlooks all the massing buildings below. Alright, so this here is a library. It's one of like the 6 or 7 or 8 or however many libraries I have in the world. The idea with this library was just, I put up another room with white dynasty wood wall, and my idea was just to add every kind of bookcase in the game. Well, not every kind, but all the exotic ones, and I have most of them here. In fact, I think I have all of them except for Martian. So yeah, that's exactly what you have here. The idea is that this is like sort of the secret library where Wizard would come down to look at all the interesting types of books that are categorized by content and location, etc. So before we go up the gray demonite brick tower, I just want to walk through here. This right here, this marble chamber, this is the king's chamber. As you see, it looks very kingly. There's banners, it's made of marble, everything's pretty and made of marble. There's some paintings. There's a painting of the guide. So I just want to say, the guide is the king of the world. You know, he is the king, so this is effectively his room. That's why he lives here. There's a bunch of bathtubs, which the guide uses for all of his, you know, lavish bath parties that he has with concubines, etc. There's a painting on the wall of the guide and shaking hands with God, and a wave, and a tiger that the guide killed during a hunting trip, etc., etc. This is where he lives. This is his place. It's very nice. And the reason why I treat him so kingly is because he's going to die anyway when I sacrifice him and throw his voodoo doll into the lava, so, you know, every new guide gets a kingly treatment before we kill him off. And now let's go over here. So this chamber, somewhat self-explanatory. This is supposed to be like a wizard's workshop. You have gray demonite brick, you have sparklestone wallpaper, you have various chests for various kinds of potions, you have the bewitching table, you have alchemist table, you have flasks, you have bookcases full of glass bookcases, you have various potion ingredients, etc. You even have a crystal ball for crystal ball materials. That is effectively what you have here. Although this crystal ball is mainly put here for functionality purposes, so I don't have to go to the other one. But yeah, the whole purpose of this area is to be, these are the things that sort of make more sense to be in the upper parts of the, you know, the castle. And this glass room right here is actually the wizard's room, or, you know, where the wizard would live. And it's all glass, and it's huge and ornate because he's a very valued member of the king's court, so of course he gets a large room and a nice place to live, and, you know, people could see him bathing and stuff if they looked through the glass. Of course they can't probably see this high, because we're far, far, far above the houses where the peasants live. So I'm gonna go up. This is gray wallpaper. The little holes are actually supposed to be small windows. I didn't bother putting glass because I thought that would look good enough. What we're gonna have... Okay, so before we go up, I just want to talk about this. This is a giant banquet hall built at the very top of the castle. It's sort of a crown jewel. You could see it from a mile away. It's supposed to be... It's like the giant banquet hall in the Titanic. You know, you have these glass chandeliers that look gorgeous. This is where all the royal people would come up and eat food and be entranced by our lavish, ostentatious nature. And look at what we've built, and it's so pretty and amazing and cool. And this is where we also treat with the aliens who currently are not here. Now, before we go up, what's known of the main castle in the land is the towers of the castle. The towers of the castle, and there are 9 of them. There are two main towers, and there are 7 towers jutting off of them. And those 7 towers are crowned with light, different forms of light that can be seen like beacons from afar, which effectively amounts to having used Gemspark block for the various crowns of all the towers. So you have green, orange, and white here, and the white tower, just because I want it to be super fancy, is entirely made out of Gemspark blocking. You could see it from a mile away to the east. And here I used straight up normal demonite brick because it felt easier. This place is pretty much undecorated because these towers, no one lives in them. They're built purely to look cool. All of this was done to be ostentatious by the king and the king's men. Every successive king, you know, dies and comes back. This is one of the main towers. This is one of the teleporters that goes back to the factory wing. I'm actually going to use it. This is the blue tower, and then we've got the red tower. So you got the blue tower. Blue because of blue shingles over there. You got a bunch of banners of various skeletons up there and a bookcase. Occasionally the wizard would come up here and read the books, etc. Some items are stored up here. And you got the red and the blue, and this is actually the spot where the aliens beam us up, but that's not going to happen right now, not in this episode. So yeah, you got the red and blue, and you got the yellow and purple towers up here. And this is the main spiral staircase. You saw it from below. This is the biggest tower, the red tower, and you have all the forms of decorative banners over here and a painting, and again, it's just like the other one. And you have even larger windows, and the whole thing uses just a nice spiral staircase. The wooden beams are painted white, use marble brick. It's supposed to look very ornate, very interesting, etc. Over here, we have 2 more towers jutting off from it. So this is another way I explain the fact that you have 2 towers jutting off from this main marble tower. Is these towers, this marble tower is built on top of the hill, so you can imagine other towers coming off from it like this. And yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. You have these towers, you have windows setting out of the towers, built for vanity and looking forward, and see the people who built the towers wanted to see the skies from afar. They wanted to be able to see the whole world. They also wanted to get to the gods, just like the Tower of Babel. And this is the last tower, the purple tower, and we're not going to go over there yet. That's part of another video. But yeah, that's effectively it. It's pretty self-explanatory and empty, and you have some small holes to act as windows, and that's pretty much it. Mostly built for vanity. Oh, and before I go, I also have to talk about these 2 rooms. These 2 rooms, as you can see, this is slime furniture, painted various funny colors, and the wallpapers are ducky and bubble. And the idea here is that these are the babies' rooms. This is where the heirs to the king live. This is where the guide's children, and all of his various legitimate children, actually get to live. And this is their bathrooms. The reason I used slime furniture was because slime furniture looks really sort of bouncy and kid-friendly. That's why it's painted this way. So these are supposed to be nice little rooms where we raise children. So you get the idea. This whole upper section is sort of used to house the king and the king's court and various people important to the king and stuff like that. Various important people live up here, and various less important people work down here and live down here. Well, less important in a sort of in a classist sense. So yeah, that's effectively it. That's effectively the main castle, and these are all the little decorations that you've had. As you could see, it's sort of an amalgam of everything. There's a little bit of everything here on purpose, you know, because this is... what you have to understand is this whole area was built first. It was the first stuff I built. I built it like over a year ago. I started this world back in... it was like July 11th, 2015, so it's very old. These parallelogram-shaped rooms especially are very old. Some of the deactuated blocks are added later. The purpose of all of it is to have the appeal of sort of a main hub. And this whole place does actually function like a main hub for me, for the player. So it does meet that functionality aspect that I talked about in my introduction. The teleporter to the Nexus acts as for functionality, the various furnaces acts for functionality, storage, etc. And everything else above is more or less for vanity and to add to the appeal that we have a castle here. And other than that, the only important thing for me was to use all the things that made sense to use in a castle. So, you know, things like all the different kinds of woods, especially dynasty wood, as well as glass and marble. And what we have down here in this little tin brick hall is just basic storage. We have a storage room full of crates, and crates and crates and crates, and that's effectively what this is. And I'm not going to talk about what's down below right now, but this tin brick hall is basically where the tour ends for this video, and we're going to continue on and go further to the west and tour the rest of the grounds of the main compound during the next video, during the next part. And yeah, that's basically it, and I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think, and, you know, cheers and farewell.